Alright, this is Lance Baker here, and I'm on my first actual video here, and I'm going to talk about that first time you end up having to go to the psychiatrist office. And what it was is I had a breakdown, and they put me on antidepressant by the name of Zoloft, and eventually it sent me into a manic state, and then or a hypomanic state, and then it went to back to a straight depression. It created this evil one of the areas I had a part-time job, and I ended up decided to just leave, and I was doing yoga at the time, at the gym, as kind of a way of trying to assist with the depression while taking these pills. And my wife said, "You're not getting better." And so I had just come across an old Air Force person that I was stationed with at the air base, and he was the psychiatrist. And he came through the door, so I know he was still practicing over at work. And so I went to his office on an appointment, and I had to go see him for an opinion and, to talk over my issue. And going into the psychiatrist for the first time is pretty humbling, extremely humbling, because you're going in knowing that you're probably going to end up getting diagnosed with something, or maybe it's just a straight depression and you just need to have it managed better and things just aren't working. So I go in as a patient, and so you feel like you don't belong, and you really don't want to, you almost like don't want anybody to see you that you're there. And yet the only problem is that everybody that's there is already there to see him. So I ended up going into this room, and eventually he comes in to see me with an intern, and he's like, "Go ahead and tell me what's going on." And I says, "Well, where do you want me to start?" He says, "Just start anywhere." He said, "Just start anywhere, and then I'll ask you questions if I need to, but just start wherever things seem to go wrong." So I ended up talking, and these are called intakes. They take about 30-40 minutes. And he's writing stuff down, and and then throughout the course of the discussion, he would occasionally stop me and ask me some questions. And I'm talking about how I had this breakdown, and they put me on the Zoloft, and then I started maybe doing some weird things. And I had this one part where I got set off by Social Security disability. It was something regarding my wife at the time, and it was such an injustice with that program and how people that need it can't get it. And I ended up going 2 days without sleep, and I was sending all these emails through all the Congress people and the Senate and the president. And so when I had mentioned that, he just looked at his intern, and he said, "Did you catch that?" And she's like, "Well, yeah." And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Don't worry about it. I'll tell you about that later." He said, "Just keep on going." So okay, so I kept on going. And then eventually he starts asking about, he asked about your spending habits, your sex life, and your sleep, and just very um, invasive questioning. And I'm thinking, what the heck, I only, talk about my proms, and now we're talking about my sex life or something, and spending. And then I come to find out what I probably knew from a nurse or a doctor talking with patients, but except this time I was in the reverse role. And what happens is when you're talking, they're trying to decipher whether or not you got straight depression or, like in my case, swung in a hypomanic state versus a regular manic state. And what happens is they start looking for certain patterns and certain things, and you have the straight depression here, and you got to meet all this criteria to be whether it's major depression, minor depression. And then on this other end, if you swung into a hypermanic or manic state, you had to have like X number of these or X number of those, to kind of go back and forth. And why that's important is that straight depression and manic depression, which is what bipolar disorder is, it's a difference in treatments. And there's two types of bipolars. There's the type 1, which is basically what we learned in nursing school or doctors, training. And those are the ones that usually come in with their overdoses. And you go on there and you find out that they previously are suicide attempts, there's alcohol in the system, there's drugs in the system, they got this bipolar disorder, and then when we get them off the vent, they're like belligerent, sometimes they're confused, they're altered in their thinking, and they just like totally disruptive, and you really just want to get them out of there, send them to some mental health unit. And that's what everybody thinks of when they think of the bipolar disorder. They think of that hypermanic state, which is typical of the bipolar ones. And all we see is that they have all these issues with drinking and drugs in the system. And so we've already labeled them, and then we'd label everybody else that has bipolar disorder. And a lot of people are type 2s. And the type 2s are much harder to diagnose. They take such a long time because people don't recognize their symptoms, and the people outside don't recognize their symptoms. They usually go from a straight depression, and then they just go a little bit, not like manic like that, they just start doing weird things, or their libido's up, so basically they're horny, and then they may be spinning a lot. They're very impulsive. They may start pushing it to the edge, maybe getting some legal troubles. They start maybe creating issues, arguments at home, and then maybe something leads to infidelity or whatever. And so you usually have maybe 3 or 4 of these things going on, and plus then you start lacking sleep, or you start being total insomnias all night, then you're focus driven on trying to complete some mission. And so it usually takes a long time to pick that up. A lot of time the damage is already done by the time it is picked up. And so now you wind up with this stigmatized diagnosis, which people take advantage of, like the lawyer using it as a free get out of jail card argument, or whatever. And so there are many healthcare workers that have this, and they're whether it be nurses or doctors, and they don't say anything, and because they really don't. But at the same time, if we keep it in the closet, then you don't have that support system that you need, because a lot of the bipolars are extremely successful in many careers, actually from everything from running a country as to, actors, to healthcare professionals, nurses, doctors, lawyers. There's just a long list of names of people that actually had it and have been very successful. And the key is learning to manage it before it manages you. And once you get that stigmatized diagnosis, then comes the hard part, and that's going home, learning to accept it, and also trying to tell your family that you're stuck with it. And the treatments are different between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. And so it's extremely important that we own up to it, start learning and find ways to learn about it, to manage it, so we can successfully live with it. Because if you don't manage it, it's going to manage you. And it's the difference between being functional versus being non-functional, from being high performance and very high skilled jobs and employment and professions, versus the homeless guy over here that can't hold anything down and it's got legal troubles. So it's totally manageable, be highly successful at it at all professional levels in all fields, from medicine and nursing and education and law and the arts. And so that's the whole purpose of this video. But my point on this one was, when you go into that psychiatrist for the first time, it's very humbling, and it actually takes your bad day and makes it worse. But you have to learn to own up to it, and then before you can learn to be successful with it. So that's the point I wanted to get on this one, is don't be afraid to own up to it. Don't be afraid to come out and be open about it. And you have to combat the stigma. It becomes an issue for those in healthcare, because a lot of times when you come up to licensing and stuff like that, you get hit with these stigmatized phrases, and you don't know what's going to happen on the other end with the auditor that's got to cross everything off. If they have a bias and they see that you have it on there, next thing you know, they may open up an entire investigation on you, to determine if you're competent, whatever, and you can be the most successful one on the planet. And it's something that carries over between that and other healthcare workers and ER, because all they see is the one that people are paintbrushed with, and it carries over, and then you that have it have to just put up with the stigma, and you have to put up with the snide comments by people that don't know. And at the same time, you gotta worry, if I answer it on this insurance form, am I gonna get declined? If I put things down on my affidavit that, do I have a mental illness, or is it, now what they have it written down is, do you have anything that impairs your ability to perform? Answers are no, I don't have anything that impairs my ability to perform. If you put mental illness, they may not even renew you, and there's no reason not to renew you. So so it's just the kind of thing that you're stuck having to deal with. But the thing is for those of us in healthcare, in order to be successful, to make the transition, we have to be functional, we have to be high performing in the most stressful of jobs, and that really means that we have to kind of be open with one another and form that successful support group. So anyway, my time's running out on this one. Peace out, and look for my next video coming up.